Happy Monday morning. Is there such a thing?
As long as there's no work, it's a happy Monday. As long as you're still breathing, it's a happy Monday.
That's it. Happy Monday. All right, I'm plugged in.
There we
Ready to
go.
go.
Now it just got happier.
Oh man,
It's a Monday.
it's a happy Monday.
Get the wires plugged in here.
Yeah, gotta get the wires plugged in.
But what I want to know is what episode are we on now, man?
Man, this is episode 33.
Well, interestingly enough, I was watching this one fella. He just started. I looked at his episode. You're on number 2, man. Okay, we're doing a little.
Yeah, so he's slacking, man. He's slacking.
Number 2.
I can't believe we're on
Yeah.
33. All right. So this one, it's kind of I like this one.
Yeah. It's up your alley. Up my
It's up
alley.
my alley. Alley-oop. Throw me the rock.
There you go.
The journey towards learning Arabic. Although I feel, let me turn this joint down and get the thing going here. But I feel that you could really apply. You could apply this thing to not just learning Arabic, right? You could talk about this really in any context.
That's right. So last week you had the idea of discussing the topic of L2 learner, which is second language learning, and but focusing on Arabic. But as you're mentioning, this could be applied to many aspects of your life, because there's a big part of learning a second language. A big part is repetition and consistency.
Yeah, no, I've been obviously learning. I've been learning other languages since I was a kid. But I think one of the things you will highlight is there is a difference between learning a language as a baby, as a kid, and then learning it in your adult life. But, to give away a little bit of the secret sauce is, don't let that discourage you, right? Don't let, because you are in your adult life, don't let that discourage you from, from taking a shot at learning another language in your adult life.
Yes.
Certainly there are challenges that can be, that come along with that. And I think, as we'll probably talk about today, I think at least half of those challenges are actually more logistic, because obviously as you get older, you just become more, when we call it in Arabic, mushattat. You become more scattered.
Yeah.
Right? You become more scattered because, all your time isn't your own.
Yes. And especially with children. But
Those kids.
Allah emphasizes, or
We
at
were
least
kids once upon a time.
at least gives us a strong indication of his signs in Surah Al-Rum, chapter 30, verse 22. It says, "And one of his signs is the creation of the heavens and the earth, and the diversity of your languages and colors. Surely in this are signs for those of sound knowledge." And it's very interesting that there's this component of sound knowledge and language, and the significance of languages, right?
Yeah.
And the depth that they can take you. And you mentioned babies and adults, and many studies have been done on that, and we've always heard that, babies can actually learn multitudes of languages if they were around that particular language. Their parents were speaking it, maybe their parents are multilingual.
Yes.
And the interesting thing to note is that because they can't make a distinction of sound. It's easier for them to pick it up. As they grow older, I think around the age of 5, that distinction is made. And so now they understand if they were speaking Japanese and let's say Brazilian, they can make the distinctions between the H sound or whatever particular sounds. And therefore now they're closing off that window where now there's a distinction made, and it becomes difficult to acquire other languages because they've honed in on those particular languages. Secondly, maybe there's only one dominant language.
Yes.
So the other one may fall off if it's not practiced or spoken readily in the home or wherever they might be. Right. However, many researchers would say, and linguists, adults have actually a stronger advantage, and that is because of experience, aptitude, the technology around them. So there's many other capabilities that adults would have to acquire a second language just as easily as the child.
Yes.
If made the effort. So yeah, that was an interesting.
Because I've always, whenever people ask me, oh man, how'd you learn the? Oh, well, you're really good at languages, and so I like to always push. Well, what does that mean? I'm good, because that
Let's
is.
define that.
I mean, maybe I am good at languages, but maybe that, maybe that way of looking at it is a little insufficient, because I think, in the idea of saying, oh, you're really good at languages, can give the impression that it's just a matter of raw horsepower or some, secret sauce talent that other mere mortals, don't possess. And, I can assure you, I am not the sharpest tool in the shed whatsoever. And so I think a lot of times it comes down to a combination of personality and habits. And so, this won't be anything like earth shattering for a lot of people. Because we've probably all read, what's his name, Cal Newport, right? We've all read the works of Cal Newport about atomic habits and whatnot. So those things won't really be somebody said, "Don't mention my name." It's like I was like, "Don't mention." I am gonna mention your name, man. I'm gonna throw you under the bus, and then I'm gonna back it up and run it over you again, man. No, I think that there's a real misnomer in the idea that language is, he's just talent. Well, you got to unpack talent. I mean, one, sure, in the way that Allah has created us. Well, في اختلاف, right, ألوانكم وألسنتكم, right, in the differences in your skin tones and in the differences in the tongues that you speak. Of course, Allah has created people with different likes and dislikes.
Right.
So it became very clear to me as a kid that I liked language and I was fascinated by language, in particular languages other than my own. So there was definitely like a fascination that's still there today of like,
sure,
I could say this sentence or I can say this phrase or these words in English, and then you can say it in another language, and like that's something about that just resonates with some part of me that might not with somebody else.
Sure.
Like to say, esta semana, like this week, and I say this week in English, and somebody might go, oh, well, whatever. Like that's not, well, for me, like, wow, that's like the coolest thing ever, right? And so I experienced that with Japanese as a kid. I experienced that with Spanish as a kid, several other languages, and obviously with Arabic as a kid. So, okay, fine. You can say that I have a disposition towards language, particularly because in the way that it's different. Okay, fine. I won't argue that. But that isn't how I learned those languages. Just merely being curious. I've always said curiosity is really important. And I think people sell themselves short when they're not curious. But obviously, curiosity will only get you so far. There has to be effort. And, so what is it that allows a person to overcome, the effort? Like a lot of people, they dream and envision of getting in great physical shape. But once you put some weight on the bar or you have to spend time on the treadmill, they either get discouraged because it's difficult, they get out of breath, or they don't like that feeling. They don't like that, or it's too much repetition. And so what are the things that you can, what are the things that you can do to counter that or dispel that or make you see those things in a different way? And so my point is that nobody learns a language without putting in some kind of effort. Like,
Yeah.
Certainly there are some people that have a naturally faster metabolism. There are some people who are definitely genetically gifted.
Right.
I'm saying, like, if you were to compare like the athletic physical world, right, to this, no doubt there are people that are just naturally more physically gifted than others. That doesn't necessarily mean that they will just out of the box be a great athlete. They still are going to have to, put in some work.
Right. Exactly. And sometimes as parents, we don't recognize or are aware when the baby is making all of those sounds, dad, 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 right? They're practicing the language.
They're practicing their sarf.
There you go. They're
practicing their morphology.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So no grammar rules. They're just learning their pronunciation and practicing, which is very interesting. And another thing to be aware of is that they're practicing out loud. They're verbalizing it, right, audibly. So
yes,
they're making that distinction. So why aren't we doing the same as adults? We didn't think of it like that, right?
We're a bunch of jokers, man.
So as you mentioned, there are for every L2, every second language acquisition has strategies. But I think one of the biggest strategies is first, as you mentioned, to make a distinction of what intent. If you're not really strongly have an intent, I went to the Arabic lecture and man, I just wanted to. He was talking about learning Arabic. I want to go do it now, and it's like a kung fu, it's Bruce Lee movie. Right. Everyone's kung fu fighting, and then a week later, this is a lot of work. I'm not into this. So, if you're not clear with your intention and setting goals, measurable, achievable, relevant, then you might never get there. It's just like
So certainly one of the issues I tend to find with people is that they say they want to learn Arabic, particularly Muslims that want to learn Arabic for the expressed idea of wanting to be able to engage with the sources of Islam. Mm-hmm. So they want to be able to read the Qur'an. They want to be able to understand what they say when they are praying. They want to be able to read the words of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They want to be able to read the books of the ulama and so on. And so they will say, this is what I really want. However, and I will draw another comparison between working out. People think that you're going to get in shape by working out. Now, obviously, if you don't move any weights, if you don't, whether it's cardio or resistance training, if you're not doing any exercise, then without a doubt, very little will probably happen. However, the process of getting in good physical shape takes place as much in the gym as it does out of the gym.
Yeah.
Right? It is in your rest time. It is in your dieting. Right? So if you think you're going to be able to lift off your belly fat or outrun your your lack of abs, no. You're going to have to be conscious about your diet through the week, through the day. You're going to have to, especially when you get into some of the shuyukh of bodybuilding like Mike Menser and some of these other guys that were really big on enough intensity. Like when you work out, you need to reach a certain level of intensity. Because if you don't, especially in weight training, if you don't shock the muscle adequately enough, then you don't get the charge going, right?
Sure.
But then you can also overstimulate the muscle, which means you have to have the rest time. So it's like there's all of these parameters and things you have to be aware of, and they all, in rest time is an activity. It's not an absence of an activity. It is an activity in and of itself, right? Going for a walk, like he was a big fan of, like when you go to walk, or if you want to, like, both build muscle but then, like, trim down, like, okay, fine, you lift your weights, you have your weightlifting sessions, but then he's like, find other, and this is obviously not about weightlifting, right? But just an example, like if you want to also reduce your body fat percentage, which is going to make your muscles appear bigger because you have less fat covering them up, then do certain exercises like low intensity cardio, like taking a walk or a slow run without, he's like, you don't want to get to the point where you're huffing and puffing. You want to be somewhat below that.
Yeah.
And so to draw the comparison then between that kind of parameter or framework and studying a language, if you think you're going to go to your Arabic class for an hour out of the week, and the rest of that week, those other, not only the other 6 days, but the day that you go to the class, the other 23 hours in the day, let alone the other 6 days and those 24 hours in each of those days, what are you going to do? Like, are you ever going to revisit the notes again? Are you ever going to revisit the reading material again? Are you going to expose yourself? Because this is going back many episodes. You talked one time about there were some, I think they're like maids or right, that they were not working out.
No.
Right? They were not working out, but they were thinking about working out.
Like,
and when you compare the group that just thought about working out to the group that didn't work out, the group that just thought about working out made more gains, made more progress.
Yeah.
So in the same way, like I would just call that exposure.
Yes.
So in the same way, the other 6.5 days of the week, what are you doing to expose yourself to Arabic? Because if you're relying upon that 1 hour in the class, I don't care who the teacher is, I don't care what text you're reading, that'll never happen.
No.
Right? So an important, and again, exposure is not talent dependent.
No.
So, there goes the argument, oh, well, he's really good at language. Maybe I am. I'm also really bad at math. So it all balances out. Right?
Sure.
Allah says, هو الذي أنزل الكتاب بالحق والميزان. So Allah Ta'ala, He balanced everything out.
Good on this
I'm
side,
absolutely atrocious at math, right? And so if you're not, if you're not exposing yourself to Arabic through the week, then you're selling yourself short, and you're setting yourself actually up for frustration and ultimately failure.
Yeah.
But it doesn't take much talent to play some YouTube videos listening to Arabic.
Yeah.
It doesn't make too much talent to, go to a website, newspaper or a blog and try like it doesn't take a lot of talent to expose yourself to Arabic. Yeah. So if that's kind of, again, that's like the naturally gifted athlete versus the average dude. The average dude though has like one heck of a work ethic and exposes himself to that which will benefit. Then, you have many people that never even knew. Also, maybe they had a latent talent, but it was covered and they had to crack that. And then and then of course, forget about talent. We believe in barakah. Right? As Muslims, we believe in blessings. We believe in barakah, and that Allah Ta'ala ultimately will be the determiner of what you will achieve. And if you pursue that which is blessing in it, and you pursue it in a blessed way with blessed intentions, and on and on and on, then, you really, honestly, it's that to me, that if there's anything that I can see, and, Imam Ibn Juzay talked about this a couple weeks ago in our class. He's like, he said, Allah kept me busy with the Qur'an. Forget about whether I grew to be this amazing. How did he grow to be this great scholar? He said, Allah just kept me busy with the Qur'an.
Right.
So are you busy with your Arabic? And
that's the key is, simply put, it's regular practice. And in a micro level, that means you're going to set aside a specific amount of time, 15, 20 minutes, whatever you can dedicate to keep it going. to keep that retention going, because you just left the classroom, you closed the book, but memory retention evaporates immediately if it's not worked. And so we're busy, we have, but if you really want something, I like how you say, you'll carve out the time, and you'll apply it. And so even writing down that schedule, okay, you know what, I'm going to wake up a little extra. I'm going to have my laptop ready right there. So everything's in your proximity to facilitate your learning environment. This is another problem we have, is that we're not making our learning environment conducive to learning.
Too many things are competing for our intelligence, and then I think you have to make choices. I would say, like, you have to think about it like over certain blocks of time. You have to make choices of what you're going to do and not going to do, so that you can eventually hit plateaus. So, me at 51, post heart attack, trying to get back in some of my glory days shape, right? If I want to achieve a certain level of physical prowess, then there's going to be some things I'm going to have to make a decision not to do. So part of the decision-making process is, what am I going to decide to do? And then what am I going to decide not to do within a certain period of time, so that hopefully I can achieve a certain plateau.
Yeah.
Right? So it's not like to say, to learn Arabic, you must forsake your life for forever and you'll never have another life ever again. But you may have to really pare it down.
Right.
So that you build up enough that you can, kind of pull yourself up to the next ledge.
Yes. Yes.
So, because I think that's how people get stuck in like self-help, self-teaching hell 101, right? They just get in this feedback loop and they never get to the next ledge.
That's right.
Where then, I think definitely so.
So chunking your time is important, and, setting aside time, even if it's just, 10 minutes, 5 minutes, you're building the aptitude, right? And then you start to scale out a little bit, add a little bit more time. And again, you reminding yourself of the motivator why you're doing this. Oh, I want to get closer to Allah. I want to understand His book. I'm going on a trip next week. Whatever it might be.
And is that
I gotta learn.
Sincere intention, or is it what Allah calls, like some of the kuffar or some of the people of the book that it calls it's just amani, umniya. It's just wishful thinking. Do you really want to do that? What are you willing to sacrifice to get to it? That has to be part of the question that you ask yourself too. And again, nobody's saying that you won't be able to have time to do other pursuits or other things, but if you are at the bottom rung of the ladder and you're also not 10 years old, so most of this is going to be like advice for adults. Your brain don't work like it did, 20, 30, 40 years ago. Just, I even know it for myself. It's funny. I was actually on the way in, I was listening to a lecture on YouTube, and then when it ended, it just automatically went to another lecture.
Okay.
And, it chooses it randomly, right? And it wound up being this, I guess, like a khutbah by Sheikh Hamza Yusuf.
Okay.
And, I feel so bad for Sheikh Hamza. People have really just given him such a hard time. People are very... Anyway, it was a very actually good reminder. And in it, he kind of anecdotally reflected on, he's like, I'm an old man now. And I started thinking like, yeah, but actually, like, if I'm like solidly middle-aged, and I've been listening to Sheikh Hamza for like 30 years.
Yeah, he's a little older.
He kind of probably is an old man now, right? And so, like, when we were with Dr. Jackson the other day, he's like, man, I'm almost 70 years old. I'm like, oh my God, yeah. And I know, like, he and Sheikh Hamza are about the same age, right? So, like, yeah, man, they're kind of like getting to be old men.
Yeah.
And so Sheikh Hamza was just remarking on, he's like, take advantage of your youth. Because he's like, now, versus like when I was young, he's like, the mind stays the same. So like, I want to stay up all night and study.
Right.
I want to stay up all night and pray. But the
body fails you.
What's the R&B? So, but my body, right? But the body is, not always compliant with that. And so...
No, you're going to sleep now.
So you have to do things smarter. Again, to make another analogy to working out. And I was watching this guy he was saying like, this is how you work out as like a dude in your 50s. All of this like isolation, you're going to do this little curl and that curl. No. You're going to squat. You're going to squat. You're going to deadlift. You're going to bench press, and you're going to curl. And that's it. Like all of this little isolation exercise. He's like, you're in your 50s. You don't get any mileage with that anymore. Right. You need to do compound exercises in the big groups because, like, who do you think you are anymore? Come on, be realistic, right? And I found a lot of great benefit in that actually by just like doing deadlifts. Like I've been able to maintain, a couple of years ago, I lost the weight, mashallah, like between being smart about my diet and just like deadlifting and bench pressing, and some occasional squatting, like it's amazing, like what I can get up on that ledge. Sure, I'd like to go to the next ledge, but right now, man, like I'm pretty busy. I got a teenager basically. I'm an imam. I'm trying to add a third Arabic class. So here's the free. Here comes the pitch, right? The shameless pitch.
Go to the funnel.
So go to the funnel. Have some funnel cake, right? I got to be realistic.
Yeah. So, and that's a good analogy because there are ways to compound your engagement, language acquisition. And that would be one, you studied through the book or you listened to the audio tape or on YouTube or something. But, there's a daily routine that we can all do is which you start to think in the language. So just because you close the laptop, close the book, your language engagement doesn't have to end there. You could wake up in the morning, and make the intention, okay, when I wake up tomorrow morning, I'm going to try and think in the second language, like we think continuously in our primary language, our first language. So I'm waking up, okay, what clothes am I going to wear? Well, you thought that in your first language. Why don't you try to think that in the second language? How does that look, right? So, and again, it takes time to just even organize those thoughts because we always default. You talk to yourself the most, so you're holding conversations with yourself continuously. Yes. So again, you can hold that conversation in the second language. So that's one activity you could do without being immersed within a society that speaks that language. Of course, that's optimal. If you could be in a native speaking language such as Arabic, you're in that country where they all speak Arabic. Well, that's by force. You're almost having to, but you're not. So one activity is to gain your fluency is to start to think in the second language. So that's one tip that you could do to focus on. There are a lot of different routines you could do. One of them I used to teach for English, which is minimal pairs. And minimal pairs is the idea where you're basically making the sounds using words and making this. And there's a lot. If you look it up online, maybe minimal pairs in Arabic. But in English, let's say it would be like ship, sheep. So the H sound there. And the more that you keep saying that in your head, you're picking up the pronunciation. So if you're trying to perfect your pronunciation, maybe in Arabic or whatever, minimal pairs could help. So I mean, these are some of the tips that people don't realize that are out there that help engage with the language. So you said be curious. And that was the analogy I always use for my students is when you get a brand new phone, it's hard to kind of navigate. Well, where's this and where's that?
Play around with it.
Play around with it. And you keep looking at it. You download this app and you're doing this. Within a month, you understand the whole functionality, probably less. But if we're not playing with the language in different ways, not just reading it, practicing it, talking with somebody in it, just trying. We're shy, but if you come to the masjid, then you might try with somebody. Kayfa halik? Ya akhi, salam alaikum. And, go a little further. And another way is to learn a word a day. So one thing I would do is I would learn a word and then I would write it down. I would practice pronouncing it. If I didn't know the pronunciation, I'd go online. I was fortunate my wife speaks Arabic, so I would ask her. See, that, I know I'm cheating. That's a cheat code. Just got to marry it.
It's not even fair that we even have Dawud on here because his wife is from Medina, man. So this brother, man, I ain't even trying to hear from you, man.
But the secret then was I would actually carry a piece of paper around with me with that word, so then I can apply it. And if I forgot it, okay, hold on. Wait a minute. I pull it out of my pocket, look at it.
Yes.
Yeah. Kayfu halik. Right? And, and then don't get into the female and masculine. But,
yes.
The idea here is that we're actively engaged in the process and we're using different techniques. In and of itself causes memory retention. Just the mere fact that you had to pull out that paper, talk to the brother or sister, now whoever it might be, and you remember that experience, that moment, which caused the learning moment. Well, should we say your synapse connected there, and that built memory retention. So, I mean, there's different ways you might go about building memory retention, but this is one of them. Actually keeping that word that you're trying to say or that sentence phrase with you. So these are some of the strategies. Practicing the listening. So again, you would take your 15-minute a day routine, which now will be, okay, Tuesday, I'm going to focus on maybe grammar. So you could block out your week. It's going to be pronunciation, vocabulary on Tuesday. You'll do, like I said, grammar maybe on Wednesday, active speaking on, right? So you could really chunk up and break up your time in your practice throughout the week.
Yeah, I think those are like actually some very, very practical and helpful strategies. I actually had a list of, because I thought, okay, great, we cover like sort of like the general gist, but then I'll put in my own personal anecdotes as somebody that has learned, 4 languages on his own.
MashaAllah, MashaAllah.
Right? So, alhamdulillah for that. And so hopefully these will, and these are the ones I think especially apply to not only learning Arabic, but Arabic for the Muslim learner, right? So I came up with, been working on this book and the system, and I taught it a couple of years ago and had a pretty good, some pretty good feedback of it. And so I named it تيسير تعلم اللغة العربية, right? Taysir meaning facilitating or making it easy, the learning of the Arabic language. للدراسة التعبدية, for the purposes of devotional learning. And so I said, okay, why, if I'm in the Muslim context, that itself is بشكل خاص. That's a very specific category.
Yeah.
So what is it that Muslims want out of the Arabic language? Or why are they learning the Arabic language? And particularly coming from a kind of ASL background, like Arabic as a second language. Most Muslims are trying to learn the Qur'an, learn Arabic for religious studies.
Right.
Again, they want to read the Qur'an and understand it. They want to read the statements of the Prophet ﷺ and understand it. They want to read the books of ulum and science, different Islamic sciences and understand them.
Yes.
So that means that we're dealing with a particular data set, right? So you got to know your data set. What are you learning it for?
Right.
And therefore, your educational materials need to support you directly in that. And this is my big critique against most of the ASL books that are out there. Alhamdulillah, may Allah Ta'ala reward all of the authors that took time to try to develop this. But my critique against them is that they are not thinking about what is the end goal. What are people trying to do? So if you take a book that is going to talk about pens and chickens and going to the market and buying tomatoes and getting on the bus and on and on. Now that might be, if you're trying to live in an Arab country, If you're trying to live in Saudi, in Egypt, in Dubai,
Sure.
those things will be very helpful to you because that's what your daily life is going to be about. None of that will help you, or it will be very, very slow and clumsily in helping you to learn the language of the Qur'an, the language of the Prophet ﷺ, and the language of the ulama.
Yes.
And I say it in those three. So you have the language of the Qur'an, the language of the Prophet ﷺ, and the language of the ulama. The language of the Qur'an will be the easiest to learn. Why? Because it is the most restricted data set. It is the most restricted data set. The Qur'an is going to talk about pretty much the same stuff over and over and over. Now, when I say that the Qur'an is easier, I do not by any means, of course, to imply that ease and depth are not the same thing. The depth and the meaning of the Qur'an far surpasses anything else.
Right.
Should go without even saying. But it is much easier to learn than, say, trying to read a book of fiqh. Because fiqh is going to talk about the tatbiq al-Qur'an. It's going to talk about the application of the Qur'an, or tatbiq al-Sunnah, try to apply the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. And so naturally, that's going to be, right? So if you take the Qur'an, it's this thick. And you take any book of statements of the Prophet ﷺ, it's going to be this thick. And then you take the books of fiqh, well, they fill up, entire libraries and so on. But the good part is, right, and so the first part of Taysir Ta'allum Lughat al-Arabiyya li Dirasat al-Abudiyya, right, the first thing that I did with this is, okay, let's take the last juz'a of the Qur'an as one of the main data sets that we'll start with. And actually, Juz'a Amma is actually kind of hard. I have actually, taught this like 4 years ago, I think. I've actually given some thought to retooling this and say, you know what, instead of starting with Juz'a Amma, because Juz'a Amma is a good example of there's how many suwar, so you go from 78 to 114, right? So that's 36 surahs, 36 chapters are in the last portion of the Qur'an, which is the portion of the Qur'an most people will memorize something from, even if they haven't memorized that entire 30th of the Qur'an. But that will be the ones that either A, they have memorized something from, and B, they're maybe very familiar with, right? But within those 36 chapters is a lot of different information. So I had initially tooled the program to deal with that. But then I started thinking, maybe I should do it with Surah Al-Baqarah. So I'm currently working on another version of Surah Al-Baqarah. Because why? Surah Al-Baqarah has less thematics.
Okay.
Right? It has less thematics than the last 30th of the Qur'an. Well, people think Juz'a Amma is something you teach kids. Juz'a Amma actually, like many things, like you do the hard stuff early on. So actually, Juz'a Amma is more difficult, in my opinion, than, say, memorizing Surah Al-Baqarah, in the idea that Surah Al-Baqarah, for pages at a time, it can talk about the same topic, right? We're going to talk about Bani Israel and the calf. We're going to talk about Bani Israel and Fir'aun. We're going to talk about the creation of Adam, and on, right? For pages, sometimes at a time, you're on the same topic. Whereas, Surah Al-Nas, Surah Al-Falaq, Surah Al-Ikhlas, Surah Al-Masad, Surah Al-Nasr, and Surah Al-Kafirun. Just the last 2 pages of the Qur'an talks about how many different topics. Very difficult, right? Even though they're short, but they're jumping all over, right, in terms of topics, whereas Al-Baqarah, for pages at a time, can stay on basically the same topic. But anyway, so I had initially designed and tailored this. Okay, we're going to look at the last 30 of the Qur'an. We are going to learn grammar based off of that. So we need to be familiar with the different qawa'id and nahu, the different grammar rules that we will find in that section. Then we're going to learn the sarf, right? The morphology and the awzan sarfiyah, the different morphological forms that are found in there. Then we'll get into ma'anin, we'll get into like, the meanings and so on. And so that was what I had initially done.
Okay.
But then to supplement that, I said also we're going to read some basic mutun, some basic texts.
Okay.
So we're going to read like the beginning part of the Risala by Ibn Abi Zayd al-Qayrawani, rahimahullah. Right? We'll read we'll read that. And so, and a few others. And alhamdulillah, I had some pretty good success, and people said they really enjoyed it, and they actually began to study, began to actually learn some things. And I think that one, it was less of a focus on grammar. Grammar is important, right? So here's another important takeaway. Grammar obviously is important in the learning of Arabic language. But as I've said, one of the most neglected aspects of ASL, Arabic as a second language study, is just vocabulary.
Right.
So if you can tell me, and I've seen this with some students of Arabic, they can tell me up and down, this is first person masculine, this is first person singular, this is third person singular feminine, this is this and that. Okay, great. It's past tense, future tense, imperative, majazum, on okay, but what does it mean? I don't know what the word means. So I said, like, you take the verb dhahaba. Dhahaba means to go. So dhahaba literally means he went. Dhahabat, she went. And adhab, I go. Madhab, right? A way of going about doing something, right? So if you don't know what dhahaba means, is it more important to know that we're talking about movement or that we're talking about first person, second person, third? I mean, obviously those things are important. But if you don't understand foundationally on a basic level, like what is the word kind of doing? Then what happens is over time you will acquire a whole bunch of pattern recognition of grammatical, instances, but you won't understand what words mean.
Sure.
Likewise, though, pattern recognition is extremely important, and I think that's where the role of morphology or ilm al-sarf, tasrif, that's where that comes in. Sarf, in my opinion, historically has been much neglected in teaching Western students about Arabic. So it tends to be all grammar focused. This is ism fa'il, this is maf'ul bihi, this is all this stuff, al-mabni lil-majhul and all, but they don't know basic vocab, and they don't know the awzan sarfiyah. They don't know the meanings that are in those words. So you take, for instance, a root of fa, qaf, and ra. You know, we might know like a person, huwa faqir, he's poor. Now, obviously, we can call like a very devout person, oh, he's a faqir because he's, أنتم الفقراء إلى الله, right? You are all poor before Allah, and Allah is al-Ghani wal-Hamid, right? Allah is rich beyond any need and worthy of praise. But, okay, if the root of fa, qaf, and ra means some type of impoverishment, if you put it on the wazn of ifta'ala, right? There's a scale, there's a pattern, there's a form of ifta'ala. If you put fa, qaf, and ra on that, then you get iftiqar or iftaqara. Right? What does that mean? It means to lack. It means to lack something. And so I gave an example, like for instance, one of the ulama was saying about how they found certain books. وَوَجَدْنَا الْقُطُبَ الصَّرْفِيَّةَ تَفْتَقِرُ blah, blah, blah. We found the books of morphology lacking and such and such and such. So I was using those as like amthal or as examples to show. Or like kashafa and iktashafa. Kashafa means to uncover. Iktashafa means to discover for oneself. So I was saying like the form of ifta'ala, that's like the personal form. So anyway, when I started going into this and say, hey, look, guys, I also want you to start to train your eye and look for the morphological forms because there's meanings in that. So we also started, there's a great book by Dr. Hisham Taha Shalash. May Allah have mercy on him, who's a great scholar who kind of pioneered some of the first more modern books dealing with a specific topic of the meanings associated with the forms, right? That helps students be able to develop what I call their intuition. And this is mainly related to what? Reading. So that's why the program was what called Al-Qari Al-Arabi, like the Arabic reader, because we're not looking primarily to speak.
Right.
Because again, the goal is that these students want to be able to read the Qur'an. I'm not saying that oral facilitation, oral capacity to speak the language is not important. I'm not saying that. It is. But for most people living in the West that aren't going to have the opportunity to go and have that type of immersion and interact and talk, those opportunities will be less frequent.
Right.
And so for me, it's like, what is our data set? Let's look at morphology. We will obviously have to study some grammar, but just knowing words is important. And so the reason why I developed this system is that, look, we're going to read data sets that reflect one another, right? So if we encounter a word in one, we're going to read another paragraph, we're going to read another book, we're going to read something else that has those same words, but in a different context. Because what happens is if you get into the habit of, I'm going to look up this word, nata'ij, results. So if I see it in this sentence, I look it up in my Hans Wehr dictionary, right? So now you get trapped into word, dictionary,
Yes.
word, dictionary, right? Versus let's look at 4 or 5 sentences, paragraphs, contexts in which the same words are used, either applied to different contexts and different arrangements, talking about, so that you can flesh out those words so that you are not overly indulgent of literal meanings, right? Or trapped with that one word means this one thing.
Yep.
No, a word can mean many, many different things.
Very important as well, contextually.
So those are the main, for me, I think, I really think especially, Sarf is a very important part of understanding the Arabic language.
Well, can you explain it just a little bit more, a brief definition of sarf? What is this for the listeners?
So
Because it's important.
Yeah, sarf, in fact, let me see if I can really quickly pull up here. There's a scholar whose name is Abdul Qahir Al-Jurjani. So Al-Jurjani is one of the giants of language from the middle period of Islam. Ironically, he is of Persian extraction. And I say this to highlight that, the giants actually of the Arabic language, of its philology, meaning going into like the study of its roots and meanings and its grammar, were all actually predominantly non-Arab, right? The Persians in particular, once they got a hold of the Arabic language, I mean, they just really went off and created these amazing works. So I got my PDF here. And so he wrote a work called Kitab al-Miftah fi Sarf, right? The book to the key to understanding morphology. And so he wrote, he said, "I'lam anna sarf," know that the word sarf, he says, at-tasrif, which is built on the scale or the foundation, the pattern of taf'il. He said it's min as-sarf. It's from the word as-sarf. And so it's extrapolated from that. He said, "Huwa an tusarrif al-kalimata al-mufradata." It is to take one single word and then to change or extrapolate from that. فَتَتَوَلَّدْ مِنْهَا أَلْفَاظ مُخْتَلِفَةً. From that you will get many different pronunciations, many different utterances. وَمَعَانٍ مُتَفَاوِتَةً. And you will get a breadth of different meanings. right? So it's to take that. So he says, وَالْكَلَمْ مُرَكَّب مِنَ الْحُرُوفِ الْبَسِيطَة, and therefore a word is just merely the arrangement of letters, in a pattern. مراعاة الولاء وبين الترتيب والحروف وإلا صار ملكا بالقلب مستوي كلم. So he said, for instance, if you take, like, what are words? Words are just sounds or letters. So you take the word kalam. Kalam is the plural of kalima. So kalima is word, kalam is words. So it's kaf, lam, mim. He said, well, what happens if you take the rule of qalb, because qalb doesn't mean only heart. This is a good example. In one context, qalb means heart. Mm-hmm. In another context, qalb means to flip around. This is why the Arabs, like especially Palestinians, right, and our brothers and sisters from Sham, mashallah, they like to make maqluba. They call it ma'luba, but maqluba. What is maqluba? Right? You put in the rice and the chicken and the batinjan and all the stuff, and when you're done, you flip it upside down. Right? So qalb nahwi, right? Qalb in terms of grammar means to flip. So if you take kaf, lam, and mim, and you flip the order around to where now it becomes mim, lam, kaf, you get mulk. What is that? Allah, that's the dominion. What? وَلِلَّهِ what? مُلْقُ السَّمَوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. So, learning to, and I'm not saying that there's necessarily a meaning that's associated between kalam and mulk, but there's all of these rules, and what it gets you to look at patterns.
Yeah.
So in many ways, when you say morphology, you might think of Morpheus in the Matrix or something. I don't know. Right? Morph. It means to change, right? And to sarraf means to change it. So you take, for instance, fa, ta, and ha. That root is associated with opening. So the first chapter in the Mus'haf is called Surah Al-Fatiha, the opening, as we would say. But then you also have a fath. Inna fatahna laka fathan mubinan. We bestowed to you a great victory. So fath in another context can mean literally an opening, but the meaning is what? A victory. And so Allah says, and we gave the Prophet ﷺ a great victory. Another is a miftah. Miftah, we're putting the meme in front, right? Miftah is what? A key. Because what do keys? They open. So the meme in front is either the thing of doing the action or the place of the action, right? Miftaha. A miftaha is like an opener, like a can opener, because it's the thing that does opening, right? Like masjid is related to sajda, sajda, right? Sajda is prostration, while you're in prostration. Sujood is, right, it is the haraka, the movement of going and being in that. The masjid is the place of prostration.
Yes.
With the fatha on the jim, masjid. Then you have the masjad with a fatha on the jim, masjad. That's that little mark you get on your forehead from years and years of the result of prostrating.
Right.
Right. So all of those are related to fath, opening. And that's what I mean, that, okay, maybe I don't know every single word. I don't know miftah, miftaha, fattah, like one of Allah's names is what? Al-Fattah. The one, you could think of not only the one who's always opening, but nothing opens except by Allah. So He is Al-Fattah, right? So when anything opens, it's always yuftahu bi'idhnihi. It only opens by His permission.
Yeah.
Right? So if I know that fataha is related to opening, and I see a word that, okay, I'm not 100% familiar with its particular conjugation. All right, you'll learn that over time, and you'll learn it through context and other things, right? That's where you start to really, like the flower starts to open up, right? The flower of understanding in the Arabic language starts to open up once you combine the knowledge of sarf with that. So that's why the program that I teach, and it doesn't have to be my program, I'm just saying whatever program you do, it really has to have a careful balance between vocabulary acquisition, basic grammar, morphology, and then just exposure. That's why one of the functions of the program is just to expose people to as much diversity within a related data set.
Yeah.
If I expose you to too much that's not related to the goal, especially in the beginning. Now, as you grow, then fine, you can become more. But that's why, little kids, when they learn basic stuff, you don't start them all over the place. You start them with a few basic things, get them comfortable with that, and then you kind of like ripples in a pond, you expand from there.
Yeah.
But those are, those are some of the things that I think would help. And then YouTube, man. YouTube. You stop using YouTube for the things you normally do. The dumb videos and the argumentation and the nonsense.
Yeah.
I mean, you could, with the right intention and Allah's blessing, you could acquire a PhD virtually in almost any topic that you could possibly think of on YouTube. I mean, when my friend Imam Sohaib and I, when we reflect on, and we look at it like, man, could you imagine having this at our fingertips when we were 18, 19, 20 years old? Like, probably never would have gone overseas or done anything. Like, amazing.
Right. Yeah, well, that was the interesting thing I found when you were teaching. I took your class for the sarf, and as a language instructor, I always was trying to find that key pattern that would really help open up the eyes to a second language, right? And I tried it, but the problem with English is there's just not one form of root words, right? And it's very difficult. The Arabic, there is this systematic, as you're putting us to, as you're informing us, this systematic root or foundational root words where you can go back and, like you're saying, it gives an indication of the meaning, even though you're not familiar with that word, because of this group of three letters has this meaning here. This could have an indication that this means this.
Yeah.
Probably it's that. And I said, well, let me try that. And the closest I could get was your prefixes and suffixes. Latin has this idea of that, but now you got to go study Latin. If you knew Latin first, then you would understand a lot of the English language, or Greek, then you would understand a lot of the English language. Oh, I know that, because of the suffix.
Right.
But yeah, it just doesn't work. It's a little bit more difficult and challenging. However, so that's what we're saying here is there are, when you go to study Arabic and you got a good educator or teacher, and they're incorporating some of these techniques and strategies of pattern recognition, it really opens up your eyes to and the way our Imam is teaching, as you mentioned, you're correlating within the same verse. If you're using the Qur'an, then you're building on this word. Oh yeah, I found it over here, but it's in a different context because of the story.
Yeah.
It's a Farun or whatever it might be. So it's an interesting technique and strategy.
So Aljani mentions, just to underpin the importance of learning morphology of sarf. So he mentioned something from a great scholar. Generally, his name is known as Ibn Asfur, but it sometimes can also be pronounced Usfur. But Asfur or Usfur, actually, it means a sparrow, or a little bird, kind of like a sparrow. And so he says, وذكر ابن عصفور أنه كان ينبغي أن يقدم علم التصريف على غيره من علوم العربية. He said that Ibn Asfur mentioned that it would be appropriate to prioritize the science of morphology over other Arabic language sciences, right? He said, as it involves the understanding إذا هو معرفة ذوات الكلام, as it involves understanding the very essences of words. في أنفسها من غير تركيب, without composition, right? So he's like Ibn Asfur, which if you're not familiar with, is one of the giants coming out of the Andalusian period, right? Another group of people that, Allahu Akbar. I mean, the Andalusians are just, what an extraordinary period in human history, in Islamic history. You talk about taking the baton and running with it, just absolute genius, that period in human and Islamic history, right? But he said, if you want to know the essences of words, you must study sarf.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, a side note that I think the audience doesn't know, I mean, Arabic speaking countries, they don't teach sarf in general. Like when you, as a child growing up there, they're going to teach you the grammar, and it's complicated. And a lot of my students say, "Oh, teacher, the grammar is ridiculous. It's so much, it's overbearing." But if I ask them, "What did you ever learn sarf?" No, they don't teach that. And my wife had to go she went out of her way to go learn sarf. It's not something you just in the educational system they'll teach
absolutely
automatically.
Yeah. I mean, when I think actually when I was teaching the class the first time, and we were looking at some excerpts from the program on sarf, right? And I think I had left something written on the board, and one of the Arab brothers came in and was like, who wrote this? And I was like, I wrote it. He's like, are you teaching this? I said, yeah. I said, I'm just trying to give them like a basic, kind of understanding of, he was like, dude, he's like, I'm from Jordan, and we don't even learn this stuff.
Yeah.
He's like, this is way over, this is way over our, most of our heads. And I'm not saying that as a means of bragging or whatnot. It's unfortunate that it's just not taught, and it should be taught. It's a very, very important part of studying Arabic.
Yeah.
And in fact, I feel like in some circles, it almost has like a bit of a mystique to it.
Right.
That, sarf. It's like, well, I mean, number one, a few years, a few hundred centuries ago, right? This was just, part of the standard.
Right.
But it's interesting that Imam Aljani, may Allah have mercy on him. It's interesting that he chose to call the title of his book Kitab al-Miftahi, right? The book that will give you the key to sarf, which is telling you in and of itself that sarf is a key thing to learn, that it's very, very, right, important. I was trying to find, there was something that reminded me about, if I find it, maybe I'll, anyway, it was just something related specifically to Asfor. So the Arabs, kind of like us, associated birds with being a little bit crazy. And so I try to find the guy's comment because he really made me laugh. But anyway, maybe I'll have to put it in the show notes. But I had this funny quote about the root of asfara. So like to asfara, it can also mean to lose one's mind. So even though the root of the word asfara means like a little asfur, right? It means a bird. But at the same time, if it's in the verbal expression of that, right, to asfara, it means like actually to go cuckoo, right? So there's something interesting, right, with birds that human beings tend to associate birds along with people going bananas or going losing their minds. But that was just like a good example of like, okay, asfur means a sparrow, but in another context, in a verbal context, it could mean to like be cuckoo, because birds like, cuckoo, right? So yeah, and again, how will you arrive at that understanding? Through studying morphology, through studying vocabulary. So that's why in the initial stages at least, not that I don't do any, but I like to sort of de-emphasize the grammar and emphasize more vocab and meaning and pattern recognition. And because I mean, one, you're gonna learn grammar as you go, no matter what. Like, oh, this is singular, this is plural, this is present tense, this is past tense,
Yeah.
this is majroor, right? This is genitive, this is mansub, this is the direct object. I mean, you'll learn these things. You don't have to worry about, in my opinion, you don't have to worry about learning grammar, at least the basics.
Right.
What you got to worry about is the other stuff.
Yeah.
Somebody said, Ishaq said, well, if you haven't already discussed it, can you speak about setting realistic expectations, goals, so that one may stay motivated in the learning process? Well, I mean, if your imam will shame you on a regular basis in front of the jama'ah, that should definitely keep the wheel greased. Well, I mean, you respond to that first. I have some ideas.
Let's repeat that one more time.
So you're saying, like, what are some things what are some things we can do or say that would speak to one having, more realistic expectations so that you don't get discouraged and you stay motivated through the learning process?
Yeah. So motivation is a big. It's the key player here. And so to foster the motivation, again, that's what I said in the beginning. What is your intent? What is your motive? So I think the primary motive, especially when we're trying to learn Arabic for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, knowing that every haruf, every character or letter, you're getting a reward for that. So what other... Or you can reevaluate your intention. I want to get closer to Allah. And these are the mechanisms that you would have to go back and renew that intention so you don't get discouraged. The second thing is that we want to look at other people who don't have the means to do what we're doing, are in a less fortunate situation. So that might be a motivator, right? We have all these means and I'm not even utilizing them. SubhanAllah. We might go back, So I know what you're looking for is like, how about, here's a motivator. We have a lot of Arabic speakers that will take a course in college and then fail the course. You took Arabic or Spanish speakers. Well, you know Spanish and then you took a Spanish course just to get through and you failed it. How did you fail that now? But the point is that's going to be your own self-integrity in how you're going to adjust and conform. Okay, it's the I don't give up attitude. I didn't do well this time, but you know what? I'm going to go back and take the class again. Whatever it might take. So, that's going to be your own certitude. But what I tell my students is, okay, you might fail this time, but what was your real intention? And really evaluate, did you put all your effort in it? And self-assess, what could you do better? Well, I should have spent more time on X, Y, and Z. I wasn't that strong in this part. I should have spent more time on this area. So, those are your self-evaluations. And along the period of you studying, you might want to self-evaluate and take the time and just reflect. And that's what I always tell. We should always do this. I tell my students and myself on big events, it's time to, you get the whole process of going through something. We never take the time to reevaluate that whole event in and of itself and say, man, that was something. No, it's more of I got through it.
Sure.
I got through it. But no. Take some time and reevaluate. So those might help you.
No doubt. I think to add to that would be you do need to have some achievables, right? And so and I even realize this myself as a teacher. It's fine for me to say, well, this is sarf, and this is nahu, this is morphology, and this is grammar, and on and on and on. But I started to think, okay, but what are some low-level achievables? Because we love achievement. When we feel like we got something that is, that's gonna, oh man, I got that, I'm gonna move on, right? So versus always staying in a state of bewilderment or a state of failure, right? Because certainly, being realistic, like, okay, things are not easy, they may not come to you immediately, don't give up. But at the same time, if you never, ever get any achievements, then that can be discouraging,
Sure.
right? And so I'm trying to work hard at a few changes to the curriculum, to the program, that I think a person will begin to feel like, okay, I'm getting something. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, you spoke about that. Like, oh, I took it. Okay, I didn't come out like Siboe, but I felt like I came out with something.
Yeah.
And I think that's good because then you feel motivated to keep going.
Yeah.
And it helps to peak or recharge or imbue you with more curiosity and whatnot. So I think that, being somewhat humble in the beginning and okay, it's you are undertaking a major task here, but are you? And I think too, like, are you achieving your goals or lack thereof due to a fault in the program? I mean, I think my program is pretty decent, but I'm not Allah. So maybe my program's crap. So we have to determine, is it the program that's not getting you there? Or the best program in the world doesn't do anything if you're not being diligent with it,
Sure.
right? So, I could go and train with, Ronnie Coleman's trainer. But if I don't, it's not about lifting the same weights that Ronnie Coleman does. Or I can definitely tell you, I am not genetically blessed like Ronnie Coleman. So I may not have the same genetic gifts. I may not be a natural freak I may not be a freak of nature with that kind of raw strength that he had. But if I probably follow the program, right? If I follow the program, so I actually wrote something interesting today on my X, on my Twitter, and I said that, that if you abandon, right, if you abandon the process, then you also abandon the results, right? And I think I said, well, يقال إذا أنهيت العملية فانهيت, right, النتائج. If you abandon the process of doing a thing, then you likewise also abandon the results, right? So you do have to stick with it for a period of time, right? And I think that's important. But at the same time, if I'm doing Ronnie's program, and I am sticking to the program, but I'm not getting results, well then, let me go look at another program. I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah.
Right? Because then that means, well, I'm not really interested in the results.
Right.
I mean, there's a give and take of truth in that. Don't worry about the results, worry about the process. I mean, that depends. If there's no result, then basically I'm just on a treadmill, right? I mean, I am getting on a treadmill for some reason, not just to be on the treadmill.
Sure.
I am getting on the treadmill to hopefully, lose some weight. So if I'm on that treadmill for months and months and months and months and months at a time, and I'm not getting any progress, well, then I need to look at some other factors, like either there's something wrong with the treadmill, or maybe treadmilling is not what I need to do, and I need to look at something else, right? Don't be afraid to.
Right.
But also at the same time, don't become always like, oh, I tried this for a second, and I tried that for a second, hopping around here and there, right? So I think you have to find a happy medium between giving things their due and their time. But then if you find after a significant investment in time that you're not making progress, either you have to do some type of assessment. Am I really being truthful to the program? Maybe I wasn't. Okay, so then you try it again. Or if I was, and it's not doing anything, well, then maybe I should look at another program.
Sure. Yeah. One side note to that is if you can record yourself.
Yeah, man.
And actually, if you have the opportunity to let an Arabic speaker hear it and they can understand it, part
We
of
all
our
sound like Abdul Basit inside our head, man.
so exactly. What are you talking about? What are you? What?
Yeah.
That's clear Arabic. I'm talking to you.
I sound like Luther Vandross running in my head.
Luther Vandross. I mean, part of that incentive you become or motivational factor is when somebody really understood you. That's in that language, and and they kind of they understood you clearly. You feel good about that. Okay, I am getting a little. Or if you're like the sarf, if you can go back in the Qur'an somewhere and try and find that pattern, well, you're getting it. Oh, I understand it. I can see it here. I could see it there.
Yes.
I mean, so you can back test on yourself to see how well you're doing, and that's part of your own assessment that you could validate your own progression.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And then just, I think being diligent in, also not don't become too happy with your successes, because what happens, somebody like, oh man, I got a little something, and then they wander away, or their attention span, they have a very short, attention span, and they don't adhere to it for, I learned Japanese as a kid. I learned Spanish as a kid. I learned French as a kid. I learned several other languages as a kid. And then actually, really, to be honest, I really learned 2 languages as, I would say, especially as an adult. Obviously, Arabic, but also Spanish. Like, I didn't really get good at Spanish until it's like one of those, like, I kind of played around with as a kid, but then as an adult, I actually really, became far more proficient with it to the point where, alhamdulillah, we had like a lady call, it was like maybe like a month ago, and she didn't speak a lot of English. She called on the phone and she was like, I'm interested in Islam, and I wound up having this 2-hour conversation with this lady on the phone, talking to her about Islam in Spanish. And I'm like, alhamdulillah, like I said, number one, if Allah blesses it, well then, most of it's already done. Because I was actually even surprised at myself that I was able to hang in there for 2 hours and talk to this lady about Spanish, about Islam in Spanish.
Yeah.
I didn't think I had it in me. So, make dua and make the best of intentions, and purify your intentions, and, ask and beg Allah for success. And that, Allah Ta'ala said what? That we, وَأَوْحَيْنَا إِلَيْكَ قُرْآنًا عَرَبِيًّا. We inspired and sent this book to you, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in Arabic. So, and again, I think every single culture that has had its turn at bat with Islam, the Africans, the Europeans, the Asians, they've all been able to establish their own relationship and learn Arabic. Like if you go to Africa, both East and West, they have a great tradition of studying the Arabic language and have produced great works in the Arabic language. The Persians became some of the most adept masters of the Arabic language. In the subcontinent, India, Pakistan, great traditions of learning Arabic. When I say Europe, who do you think were the Iberians that converted to Islam, right? The Spanish that, sure, they're a mix of, the Amazigh from North Africa and the Arabs that came out of the Hijaz, but also they're the people of Europe, and Andalus, some of the greatest works in Arabic, literature and whatnot came out of there. So it's something that Allah Ta'ala has given a clear sign that it isn't going to be your ethnicity that's going to hold you back. It's not going to be your lack of Arabness that's going to hold you back in your acquisition and facility with this language.
Yeah.
So,
alhamdulillah.
Try to work at those things. And I think one of the last thing I'll say, try to, if possible, an early on goal to shoot for is to wean yourself off of the need for tashkil. Meaning that, when you write Arabic, especially like when it's, in print, right, in a book, and you have a word that's written without the vowel markings. that is hard and it takes time, but I would say put that as your goal and don't make it an absolute. Like you're a total failure until you can't read anything without, no, but just put that as a goal to where progressively you move forward to not having to be able to rely on that, and that you can confidently recognize this is a noun, this is a verb, this is the subject of that noun, whether it is applied or implied, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And so I like to give examples, like that. Again, going back to Dr. Shallash's book, the one on the meanings related to the morphological forms, like one of his introductory sentences that I use as an example sentence in being able to identify not only a verb and a noun, but who is the subject for that noun and who is the object for that verb, right? So he writes, وَقَدْ أَفْرَدَتْ طَائِفَةٌ مِنَ اللُّغَوِيِّينَ قِسْمًا مِنْ هَذَا الْمَوْضُوعِ بِتَعْرِيفٍ مُسْتَقَلٍ كَبَابْ فَعَلَ وَأَفْعَلَ. So he wrote that, a group of linguists or a group of the language people, right? They dedicated a section in their book specifically, or an independent selection on this, in the chapter about the form of fa'ala and afala. The point is that the verb afradat, well, who's the subject? It's the ta'ifa. It's the group, right? Min al-lughawiyyin. And then what is the word qasman, right? Qasman means like a section. It's the object of afradat. The point is, if you look at it without the tashkil, afradat looks like it either could be a past tense feminine, afradat with sukun, or it could be first person past tense, afradtu. So if it's afradtu, right, that I dedicated ta'ifa. In some ways, it doesn't make any sense because now ta'ifa would be, instead of being ta'ifatun, it would be ta'ifatan.
Yeah.
Right? So, and without the tashkil there, well, how do I know? Well, you're dealing with a noun that is feminine, and you're dealing with, so it could be feminine in terms of the verb. It could be a third person feminine, or it could be a first person, past tense or feminine past tense. But then you have this qisman. Well, that's being affected. That's obviously like the direct object. So like it doesn't make any sense that I dedicated a group from amongst the linguists to be a separate section. Like that don't make no sense, right? So you will kind of learn through it.
Yeah.
That's how you slowly wean yourself off of the need for the vowel markings. So I like to give lots of sentences like that, where on first blush, there's kind of a level of ambiguity with that. Is that feminine past tense or is that first person past tense? Well, you got to look at the rest of the words on the page that will guide you to making that choice. In the beginning, that's going to, that'll be a little bit slow and laborious, right? After a period of time, you'll pick it up.
Yeah. Yeah, these are context clues, we call them.
Exactly. Context clues, right? So I try to also teach through that way. So we'll look at lots of examples like that will train you. And of course, there'll be trick ones where like, oh, no, actually in this context is this or that. But then after a while, it'll be hard for you to be tricked.
All right.
Because you're like, I'm looking at the context and it leads me to the right answer, right? So
that's right. Yeah, alhamdulillah, mashallah.
So stay tuned. We're working
We're
on
waiting.
it. We're working on this guy. I need to do a little bit more revision, and feedback. I'll probably be, coming to you for some feedback, inshallah. But inshallah, we hope to have this out, maybe in a month or two, be able to launch. So stay tuned for that.
Yes, alhamdulillah.
All right, man. Well, episode 33, man. I can't believe we did it.
All right along.
Well, time to take us out with the theme music here. I'm tired, man.
Yeah.
I need a cup of coffee.
There you go.
Definitely need a cup of coffee. All right. Well, inshallah, we appreciate everybody hanging around. We had some good questions. We had some good feedback. We hope that this was useful.
Yeah.
And maybe going forward, as we get closer to the launch, I'll start to share some little
Breadcrumbs.
vignettes, little breadcrumbs.
All right.
Put them out there for that, inshallah.
Yeah, sprinkle me, baby.
Yeah. All right, folks. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.